Let's go. Shalom mishpacha. Mishpacha is family. It's a Hebrew word, obviously, and it's a very endearing word because it's this close ties that you have with each other. Mishpacha in the family of God is even deeper because there's a spiritual rooting. And so this is who I want to address you as, if you indeed are. If not, you need to be born again. Simple as that. But it's something you and Yeshua have to have a conversation about, you and Jesus. So you become a part of his family. So this is going on now, the celebration of the Feast of Tabernacles. It's the last of the fall feast, the last feast of the calendar year in the Bible. And it has a lot of symbolism. And one of the things is based on the sacrificial system, which is what the Torah is about. It's based on. It's not all about, but it's based on that. And in this fall season, there's 3 feasts that are celebrated, this being the final one. And in this one represents an ingathering of all the nations. You'll see that in Zechariah. They're commanded to come in this age to come. All the nations of the world are commanded to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles in Jerusalem. Now, the reason is because this is a reminder that the Jews were given through Moses in the wilderness, that when they entered the land, they were to celebrate this every year. And there was a certain way you celebrated it. And it was a 7-day feast, but it also included a last day, which is called Shemini Atzeret, also combined with Simchat Torah, which is the same day. Shemini Atzeret means the 8th day or the 8th gathering, so they gather every day in assembly and they worship the Lord. Right now in Jerusalem, there's a lot of worship going on, and many representatives from the different nations are there, believers, Christians. But it's the reminder of the difficulty of living in tents for 40 years before they entered into the Promised Land. And the tabernacle part is because they had a tabernacle in the wilderness where they gathered for their meeting with God. That's where they met with God. And the glory of God would fill the tabernacle. And then the same thing happened when Solomon dedicated the temple in Jerusalem centuries later. So in the dedication of the temple, it was also representative of the tabernacle in the wilderness. So a very strange thing happened that's different from all the other feasts. They had sacrifices, that's part of their system. But this feast, they sacrificed 70 bulls. And each day it was diminishing. I think they started with 13, they keep going down, but it was a total of 70. And they realized that stood for the nations that are mentioned in Genesis chapter 10, I believe it is, the 70 nations that are named in that chapter. So the 70 bulls was a sacrifice for each of those nations. See, the message of the Jews that were given through Moses, and then, starting with Abraham, then through Moses, and then the prophets later on, it was always to Israel so that they could bring it into the nations through all the families of the earth, to bless them. It's all about blessing. And I can't say that clear enough, because this is what Israel is here for. Now, I'm not saying they did that. They screwed up. And that's why they went into the captivity in 2 different times. And then ultimately, they were scattered into the nations, which meant no Israel. So now they're back in Israel. And last year they celebrated this feast, and the custom on the Shemini Atzeret, or the last day of the feast, the last great day of the feast, by the way, this is when Jesus got up and says that if anyone is thirsty, let him come to me. He shouted that out on the last day of the feast. I believe that was then. But it's either John 8 or John 10, but you can search it. So Jesus celebrated the feast, that's my point. And he identified himself as the one who is the central theme of all the feasts of Israel. So, but this one, it speaks about the nations. In Zechariah, you could read that all the nations in the future will come to Jerusalem and celebrate it. They're commanded to. But on this day, a year ago, on the last day now, Shemini Atzeret, Simchat Torah. Shemini Atzeret is the rolling up of the scrolls and starting over. So they finish reading the Torah for 5 books of Moses for the entire year, and they start over on that day. Simchat Torah is rejoicing over the Word of God, basically, the Torah. It's not just commands, which is kind of confusing to Christians. It's God's nature. It's describing his nature and his relationship with those who follow him or should follow him. So it's a joyous time, or at least it should be. A year ago, on Simchat Torah, is in our equivalent October 7th. So the calendars are different. In Israel, it's a lunar calendar, and we go by a solar calendar. The dates don't coincide. So we already had October 7th. Their October 7th is coming tomorrow. Is that right? And or Tuesday. So, but last year, a year ago on October 7th, the most joyous day of the year, and you can believe that Hamas knew that, that's when they bursted into Israel and committed these just absolutely barbaric crimes against humanity, killing, massacring, and people already argue that happened. It's mind-baffling. And they say it didn't happen the way they said it happened, etc., etc. Well, you tell that to the people whose families were butchered in front of their eyes. It happened. It was absolute savagery. And so that was on the day that was supposed to be the most joyous day of the year. They burst through the walls, the border walls, the fences, etc., and just immediately started massacring Jews. Unarmed civilians, okay? 1,200 of them killed, 258 taken hostage. Now, here's the thing. No one planned it this way. I can't see anyone could even think that someone planned it this way. But the remaining hostages, which God help us if there's not 20 like they said, but there's supposed to be 20 living hostages that have been there for getting close to 800 days. And you can believe that they've been severely treated. So that's supposed to happen on either tomorrow, Monday, or Tuesday. And it has to happen. There's deadlines. And so all this stuff is going on right now in Egypt between these negotiators to make sure it all happens. Even the Red Cross, which has been uninvolved, is there to assure, the safety and the health of those who are going to be freed. There'll be corpses that are going to be given up also, but obviously they're not alive. But the whole world is watching now. And there's some on one side, some on the other side. But on the day of Simchat Torah, in that year, there was something that didn't happen that happened in Solomon's day when they celebrated. And this is what I'll read to you in 1 Kings chapter 8. At the end, after they observed the festival, Solomon's and all of Israel with him in Jerusalem, he sent the people away on the following day. And they blessed the king, the people did, and then they went home, joyful and glad in heart for all the good things the Lord had done for his servant David and his people, David being Solomon's father, the king of Israel. And they were excited, they were joyous. Why? Because God had kept his promises for centuries to them. He'd maintained them as a people. He brought them into the promised land. He allowed them to have a temple to build, to worship him. That's the purpose of it. To gather, have fellowship, one another, family, and celebrate the joy. Then they would bring it into the nations. That was the indication. That was the intention. And it didn't happen last year at all. In fact, the absolute opposite happened. They mourned with bitter tears and crying throughout the nation. And that mourning and crying has continued because they will not stop until all the hostages are released. And that's at the cost of 2,000 prisoners that are Hamas terrorist prisoners that have life sentences, double life sentences, including prisoners of war that have been taken. So that's 2,000 for hopefully 20 Israeli prisoners of war. But the war didn't start from Israel's side. You got to know that. The war started when Hamas broke the peace treaty that they already had in force and invaded Israel. But this is what gets me. The world is still crazy with this venom to prove that Israel is the bad guy. and hope. This is my hope and prayer. Not only would the hostages come home safely, and if you're a believer, please pray this way. Not only that, but that Hamas would be seen for what it is. Israel is not out to destroy Hamas. If they were, the next day, like October 7th is when it happened, by October 10th, let's say, Hamas could have been completely destroyed. They had the wherewith to do that, but they didn't because, number one, they knew that the hostages would go with them, and human life is too sacred for them to take the chance of killing their people. Now, I won't go into any further details, but I want you to also know this. There is no venom in the population. We're talking in general terms. Like the Jews are categorized in very general terms. In general terms, there is no hatred from the Jewish side to the Palestinian people, the people. There is hatred for what they've done, Hamas and all the militants, but not for the individual people who didn't make these plans and didn't purpose in their heart for this. And a lot of them that are civilians follow Hamas, so they're not all innocent. But there is hatred that is so deeply embedded in them that the one thing they need the most, more than anything, and so do unbelieving Jews, is to hear the message of the Feast of Sukkot or Tabernacles, which is that God wants to tabernacle with us. He wants to be, in fact, the New Testament speaks in the book of John about how that he tabernacles within us when we're born again. If the Arab Muslim people come to faith in Yeshua, the Jewish Messiah, the hatred drops. If it's a real event, being born again by the Spirit of God, the hatred drops. I've seen it time and time again. The hatred drops from the Jewish side. If there is any, then certainly there will be some. Hatred for their enemies, because the Bible calls it an ancient enmity. It's going on for centuries. Donald Trump, God bless him, he is not the solution for the Middle East peace. The only solution for the Middle East peace is Yeshua. And you, if you're a Christian, a believer in him, you need to pray that way if you want to see this story end properly, and even in the coming days. So bless you, consider these things, take them to heart, and bring it to the Lord. Shalom, shalom.